Imagine finding out the person you love the most, the one you trusted with your whole life, is secretly planning to destroy you. That's exactly what happened to Amelia, a Texas woman who thought she had the perfect marriage, until one shocking discovery changed everything. Betrayal, lies, secret affairs, and a fight for her family's legacy. This is a story of heartbreak, courage, and the strength to rise again when your whole world falls apart. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. Texas heat has a way of pressing down on you like a heavy blanket, thick and endless. But inside the big stone house that sat on the edge of Dallas, Amelia's world felt even heavier. From the outside, people admired that house. Neighbors driving by would slow down just to glance at its tall windows, the green lawn that was trimmed every Saturday morning, and the elegant black car parked out front. To them, it looked like a picture of success. They imagined a happy family, a love story, a dream. But the truth was different. Inside those walls, Amelia felt her heart carrying a weight that no one else could see. Her husband, Daniel, was a man who carried himself with confidence. He was charming when he needed to be, quick with a smile, and always dressed sharp in tailored suits. To the world, he was respectable, admired. People in town called him hard-working, ambitious, a man who had climbed high in life. Amelia once believed it too. She believed in his words, his promises, his touch. But lately, she began to notice the cracks in the picture. Daniel's warmth had cooled. His late nights became more frequent. His excuses about meetings and business trips never came with clear answers. And while Amelia told herself she was overthinking, her heart whispered a different truth. Amelia wasn't just any woman living in that big house. She was the daughter of John Miller, a man everyone in Dallas respected. John had been known for his kindness, his hard work, and the small construction company he built from the ground up. When he passed away, he left Amelia not only with his fortune but with his name and reputation to protect. People looked at her as John Miller's daughter, the one who inherited his legacy. She carried that pride carefully, almost like a fragile glass she didn't want to drop. That's why marrying Daniel felt, at the time, like the right decision. He seemed like the kind of man who could stand beside her, help her guard her father's name, and build something even greater together. But as days passed, Amelia started to feel like she was walking through her life alone. She would wait at the dinner table for Daniel, the food on her plate turning cold, the clock ticking louder with every minute. He would stroll in hours later, smelling of cologne that wasn't hers, his tie loosened, his smile faint, and his excuses rehearsed. "Long meeting," he would say. Or, "You wouldn't understand, it's just business." She would nod quietly, hiding the storm in her chest, because arguing only led to cold silence that stretched for days. The only person Amelia could lean on was Mark, the driver who had been with her family for over a decade. Mark wasn't just an employee. He had been saved by Amelia's father years ago when his own life had taken a rough turn. Since then, Mark had been fiercely loyal, treating Amelia almost like his own daughter. He noticed things she tried to hide. He saw the redness in her eyes after sleepless nights. He saw her pretending to smile at gatherings when Daniel held her hand like a trophy but kept his heart elsewhere. Mark carried those observations quietly, until one day he couldn't anymore. It was a humid evening when Mark finally spoke. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and pink, the air buzzing with cicadas. Amelia had just returned from her visit to her mother's grave, a place she went often to clear her thoughts. Mark helped her out of the car, but before he could step back, he looked at her with a kind of urgency she wasn't used to. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I don't mean to overstep, but you need to know something. Mr. Daniel, he's not the man you think he is." Amelia froze, her heart pounding. She wanted to shut him down, to protect herself from words she wasn't ready to hear. But the way Mark spoke, the heaviness in his tone, made her stay still. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his eyes lowering before meeting hers again. "He's been lying to you." "I've seen him, ma'am." I followed him when he asked me to drop him off for those so-called meetings. He's been with another woman. And it's not just an affair. He's planning something worse. I don't want to scare you, but I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Amelia's knees nearly gave out. The world around her spun. She gripped the car door just to steady herself. No, she said, her voice cracking. You must be mistaken. Daniel, he couldn't. But deep down, her heart knew Mark was only confirming what she had felt for months. The late nights, the lies, cold distance. It wasn't her imagination. It was real. Tears filled her eyes, and Mark reached out carefully, as if afraid to cross a line. In his desperation to comfort her, he did something he would regret. He leaned in and kissed her, a quick brush of lips that carried more fear than desire. Amelia pulled back instantly, shocked, hurt, confused. Don't, she whispered, shaking her head. Mark stepped back, his face filled with regret. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I hate seeing you in pain. Please forgive me. That night, Amelia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside her. His breathing steady, his body turned away. Her mind replayed Mark's words over and over. She wanted to believe Daniel was still the man she married, but memories of his cold stares, his dismissive tone, and the strange papers she once found in his study refused to let her rest. She remembered hotel receipts tucked inside a drawer, receipts he claimed were for business lunches. She remembered the times he came home with expensive gifts, only to never give them to her. At the time, she convinced herself maybe he was planning surprises. But now she wasn't sure. The following days were filled with unease. Amelia watched Daniel more closely, noticing the way he guarded his phone, the way he stepped outside to take calls, the way he smiled a little too much at messages that weren't hers. She pretended not to see. But her silence wasn't ignorance, it was strategy. She needed to know the truth before she could act. She needed to be certain. So when Daniel announced he had another late meeting, Amelia decided to follow. She asked Mark to drive her quietly a few blocks behind Daniel's car. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of her seat, her breath shallow. The night was dark, the roads almost empty. Daniel's car finally pulled up in front of a small apartment building on the other side of town. Amelia's heart sank when she saw a young woman step outside, her smile wide, her arms opening as Daniel walked toward her. They embraced like lovers who had nothing to hide. Amelia felt a sharp pain in her chest, like glass cutting her from the inside. Her husband, the man she trusted, the man she thought would protect her father's legacy, was holding another woman as if Amelia never existed. Mark's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. His jaw clenched. That's her, he said quietly. Her name's Belinda. He's been seeing her for months. And there's more. I overheard him talking about your inheritance. He doesn't just want to betray you, Amelia. He wants to take everything your father left you. Amelia pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She couldn't breathe. It wasn't just an affair. It was betrayal on every level. Love, trust, family, legacy. Everything her father worked for, everything she held dear, was in danger of being stolen by the very man she had promised to love. That night marked the beginning of Amelia's silent war. She returned home, her face pale, her body trembling, but her spirit beginning to stir. For the first time in months, she didn't cry herself to sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a new determination forming inside her. Daniel thought he could deceive her, use her, and destroy her father's name. But Amelia knew one thing. She wouldn't let him win. The morning after Amelia followed Daniel to that apartment, the Texas sun rose like it always did, burning bright and merciless, but the world felt darker to her. She stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she didn't drink, staring at the steam rising and disappearing into the air. Daniel strolled in, humming lightly. His tie perfectly knotted, his cologne strong. He kissed her on the cheek like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't been in another woman's arms just hours ago. Amelia forced a smile, her heart screaming inside. That was the moment she realized just how skilled he was at pretending. He was a man who could live two lives at once, and he thought she was too blind to see. But Amelia was not blind anymore. She saw everything. She just needed proof. Proof strong enough that no one could deny it, not even Daniel himself. Because if she confronted him now, he would twist her words, call her paranoid, make her doubt her own sanity. That was the kind of man he was. Smooth with words, confident in lies. Amelia knew she had to be smarter. She began by paying closer attention to the small details Daniel thought went unnoticed. When his phone buzzed, she memorized the rhythm of his secretive smiles. When he left his jacket tossed carelessly on a chair, she slipped her hands into the pockets, finding folded receipts from restaurants she had never been to, gift receipts for jewelry she never received. Each discovery was like a pinprick to her heart, but she didn't flinch. She collected them quietly, storing them in a folder hidden deep inside her closet, behind her late father's old coats that still carried his scent. At night, when Daniel was asleep, Amelia would walk quietly into his study. The room smelled of leather and paper, her father's books still lining the shelves. Daniel rarely let her near his desk, but she had the keys. She opened drawers slowly, her heart racing as if the walls themselves might catch her. She found documents with forged signatures, accounts in her name she had never opened, transfers of money that didn't make sense. She photographed everything with trembling hands, her phone shaking as she clicked. Each picture was another piece of the puzzle, another brick in the wall of betrayal he had built. Mark became her silent partner. Every day he drove Daniel when called, but in his spare hours, he followed Daniel's steps. He brought Amelia information, names, places, even whispers he overheard when Daniel thought no one was listening. One evening, Mark returned with eyes dark and heavy. "He's not just stealing from you," he said. "I heard him on the phone. He was talking to that woman, Belinda. He said once he has full control of your inheritance, he won't have to deal with you anymore. Amelia, he's planning to get rid of you." The words hit her like a hammer. Her breath caught, her chest tightening until she thought she might collapse. "Get rid of me," she repeated, her voice faint. Mark nodded grimly. "Yes." He said it like you were a burden, like you were just in his way. "He doesn't just want your money. He wants your life gone so he can live freely with her." Amelia sat down, her body trembling. She remembered her father's voice, the way he always said, "Trust can build a kingdom, but betrayal can destroy it faster than fire." She never thought she would live those words so literally. The man she gave her heart to, the man who vowed to protect her, was planning her destruction. For a moment, she felt crushed under the weight of it all. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw everything in the house until the walls echoed her pain. But she didn't. She sat still, her hands clenched, her eyes hardening. If Daniel thought she was weak, he was wrong. She was John Miller's daughter. She would not allow her father's name to be dragged through the mud. She would not allow herself to be erased. From that night forward, Amelia became careful. Every word she spoke to Daniel was measured. Every smile she gave him was practiced. She treated him like a stranger living in her house, pretending all was normal while inside she carried the sharp edge of truth. Daniel didn't suspect a thing. He laughed, he flirted, he carried on his double life, thinking Amelia was still under his spell. But Amelia was already one step ahead. She decided she needed undeniable evidence, something so clear it would expose him completely. One evening, while Daniel showered, she unlocked his phone using the fingerprint he left behind while asleep. Her heart raced as she scrolled. There they were. Hundreds of messages with Belinda. Messages full of promises and plans. "Soon, baby," one read. "Once I get everything tied up, we'll leave this place and start fresh. She won't be a problem anymore." Amelia's hands shook as she read them, each word like poison in her veins. She saved every message, sending them to her own email, careful to erase any trace on his phone. The messages weren't enough. She needed him to incriminate himself with his own voice. So, with Mark's help, Amelia placed a small recorder inside Daniel's office, hidden among the bookshelves. Days later, it captured exactly what she feared. Daniel sat on the phone, his voice sharp and certain. "I told you, Belinda, just be patient. Once I access her accounts, it's over. She won't stand in our way. I'll make sure of it. Then it's just you and me." His words chilled Amelia to her core, but at the same time they fueled her resolve. She had what she needed. Yet gathering evidence wasn't enough for her soul. She needed to see with her own eyes how far Daniel had gone. So one afternoon, while Daniel claimed he was out of town for work, Amelia and Mark drove to Belinda's apartment. The building was modest, far from the luxury Daniel lived in with Amelia, but inside it was filled with gifts Amelia once thought were meant for her. Designer handbags, jewelry boxes, expensive perfumes lined Belinda's shelves. On the dresser sat a framed picture of Daniel and Belinda together, smiling as if they were husband and wife. Amelia felt her chest tighten, but she forced herself not to cry. She had cried enough. Now she needed strength. As they left the apartment, Amelia looked at Mark. "He thinks he's clever," she said softly, her voice trembling but firm. "He thinks I'll just disappear quietly. But he doesn't know me. I'll fight for my father's name. I'll fight for my life. And I'll make sure everyone sees him for who he really is." That night, Amelia returned home before Daniel. She sat in the living room, the lights dim, the evidence folder on the table in front of her. She ran her fingers over it, her mind replaying every memory. Her wedding day, the promises, the laughter they once shared. All of it shattered now, all of it replaced by lies. She felt anger rise inside her, but also sorrow because she realized something painful. She wasn't just losing her husband, she was losing the future she had once dreamed of. When Daniel finally walked through the door, smiling like the perfect husband, Amelia looked at him and felt nothing but a cold determination. He didn't know it yet, but his game was almost over. And deep down, Amelia knew the storm was only beginning. The days that followed felt like walking across thin ice. Every step Amelia took, every word she spoke to Daniel, felt dangerous. If he sensed even the slightest suspicion in her, he might move faster. He might try to silence her before she was ready. So Amelia kept her mask on. She smiled when he smiled, laughed at his jokes, and asked about his so-called business meetings. To him, it must have felt like everything was under control. To her, it felt like living in a cage with a wolf, pretending not to notice his teeth. But behind that mask, Amelia was sharpening her plan. The evidence folder grew thicker every day. Messages, receipts, photographs, recordings, each piece telling the same story of betrayal and danger. Amelia would sit late into the night, listening to Daniel's recorded voice over and over until it no longer made her cry, until it only made her stronger. "She won't be a problem anymore." Those words echoed like thunder in her chest. They were terrifying, yes, but they were also empowering. Because now she knew who he really was. Mark became her anchor through those long nights. He would often bring her updates in hushed tones. "He met her again today," Mark would say. Or, "He was asking about your father's old lawyer." Each report was another puzzle piece. Amelia listened carefully, her eyes cold but focused. She knew she couldn't trust anyone else. If Daniel could lie so easily, who was to say others around them weren't also deceived? She kept the circle small, just herself and Mark. Still, there were moments when the weight of it all crushed her. One afternoon, she sat alone in her late father's study, staring at his old photographs. His smile seemed to reach out from the frame, warm and protective. "What would you do, Daddy?" she whispered, her voice breaking. She closed her eyes, remembering his lessons. He had always told her that strength wasn't about shouting the loudest or striking the hardest. It was about standing firm when the ground shook beneath you. She wiped her tears and whispered, "I'll stand, Daddy. I'll stand for both of us." Her chance to set the trap came sooner than expected. Daniel came home one evening, unusually cheerful. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat across from her, his eyes gleaming with a secret he thought he was hiding well. "You know," he said casually, "I've been thinking. Your father left you a lot of assets. Maybe too many for you to handle on your own. I could help manage them, make sure they're put to better use." Amelia's stomach turned, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head and smiled gently. "That's thoughtful of you," she said softly. "Maybe you're right. I haven't been paying much attention to all of it." Daniel's grin widened. He leaned forward, his tone dripping with persuasion. "Exactly. You trust me, don't you? Let me take care of the accounts. We'll both benefit." It took everything in Amelia not to spit out the truth then and there. Instead, she reached for his hand, her fingers trembling only slightly. "Of course I trust you, Daniel. You're my husband. I'll talk to the lawyer about giving you access." Inside, her heart pounded so loudly she feared he could hear it. But Daniel only smiled, satisfied, convinced he still had her under his control. That was the moment Amelia knew her trap was working. Later that night, she called her father's old lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man she trusted since childhood. She explained everything, carefully without names, painting the picture of a wife who suspected betrayal. The lawyer listened quietly, then sighed. "Amelia, your father trusted me to protect you. If what you're saying is true, we'll set up safeguards. Pretend you're granting him access, but in reality, every move he makes will be recorded. He won't see it coming." Amelia thanked him, her heart heavy with both relief and dread. The plan was in motion now. There was no turning back. Over the next week, Daniel became bolder. He would return home late, smelling of expensive cologne and perfume that wasn't hers, tossing his jacket aside with the careless confidence of a man who believed he was winning. He asked Amelia more frequently about the accounts, about the paperwork, about when she planned to sign the documents. Each time, she reassured him with soft words and gentle smiles. "Soon, Daniel. Very soon." But the nights were torture. Amelia barely slept, lying awake beside the man who was plotting her end. She would listen to the rhythm of his breathing, wondering how she had ever loved him, wondering if the man she fell for had ever truly existed. Sometimes, her chest tightened so much she thought she couldn't breathe. Fear clawed at her, whispering that he might act before she was ready, that she might not survive long enough to expose him. She would clutch the evidence folder to her chest like a shield, whispering prayers into the silence. Mark noticed her exhaustion. One morning, as he drove her to the grocery store, he glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You're breaking yourself, Amelia," he said softly. "I can see it. Don't let him take your strength before the fight is even here." She forced a small smile. "I'm holding on, Mark. For my father. For myself. For the truth." And then came the night when everything shifted. Daniel had been drinking more heavily than usual. He stumbled into the living room, his words slurred, his smile crooked. "You know," he said, waving his glass, "you don't appreciate me enough. I do everything for us, and you just sit there, pretending like you're some princess on a throne." Amelia's blood ran cold, but she kept her face calm. "I appreciate you, Daniel. More than you know." He laughed bitterly, leaning closer. "Do you? Do you really? Because sometimes I wonder what life would be like without you dragging me down." His eyes glinted dangerously, his smile sharp. "Maybe I'd be free." For the first time, Amelia felt true fear ripple through her veins. The mask slipped from Daniel's face, revealing the darkness she always sensed. She forced herself not to look away, not to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "I'm not dragging you down, Daniel," she whispered steadily. "I'm your wife." He stared at her for a long moment, then chuckled coldly, walking away. But the words lingered in the air, heavy and threatening. That night, as Amelia lay awake, she realized something crucial. Daniel was losing patience. His mask was cracking. He wouldn't wait much longer before making his move. She had to act soon. The next morning, Amelia put her plan into its final stage. She met with Mr. Henderson, finalizing the papers Daniel believed would give him full control of her inheritance. In reality, the documents were traps, designed to record his every action and tie him legally to fraud. When she returned home, she placed the folder on the desk in plain sight. Daniel found it that evening. His eyes lit up as he flipped through the papers, not realizing Amelia was watching him closely. He kissed her forehead, murmuring, "You won't regret this, sweetheart. We'll be happier than ever." But Amelia knew the truth. The man kissing her was not her husband anymore. He was her enemy. As Daniel disappeared into his study with the documents, Amelia felt her chest tighten. The rising tension had finally reached its breaking point. The storm she had been bracing for was almost here. And deep inside, Amelia knew. The next move would decide everything. Amelia sat at the edge of her bed that night, the shadows of the room stretching long across the floor. The faint hum of cicadas came in through the slightly open window, mixing with the steady creak of the old ceiling fan. Her heart was heavy, but her mind was sharper than it had ever been. She had seen enough, heard enough, and lost enough. The man she thought would stand beside her through every storm had become the storm itself. The home she thought was her safe place had turned into a cage where betrayal lingered in the air like dust. She whispered into the night, "Daddy, I hope you're watching. I won't let him destroy what you built. I promise." Her voice trembled, but her spirit was steady. Those words carried her through the silence until morning light crept in. Dennis had been up all night too. He leaned against his truck parked just outside, sipping black coffee from a paper cup. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but he stayed close like he always had. When Amelia came out in the morning, her face pale but her posture straight, Dennis stood up immediately. "You ready?" he asked softly, as if the whole town was still asleep and they didn't want to wake it. "I'm ready," Amelia replied. But her voice didn't sound like yesterday's Amelia. It was stronger, colder. They started putting their plan into motion. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Amelia wanted Chinidu's mask ripped away in front of the world. She wanted the lies to crumble like sand, leaving nothing but the bare reality of who he was and what he had done. The first step was finding proof. Not suspicions, not gut feelings. Real, undeniable evidence. Dennis suggested starting with the papers he had once glimpsed in Chinidu's study. "He's sloppy when he's comfortable," Dennis said. "If he thinks you're not watching, that's when he slips." So Amelia began watching. She stopped asking questions. She stopped showing her doubt. Instead, she played her role as the trusting wife, smiling at the right times, nodding when Chinidu spoke, even kissing his cheek when he left the house. And it worked. He started to relax again, believing she had swallowed the lies whole. At night, when he locked himself away in his study, Amelia waited. Sometimes she lingered in the hallway, listening to the sound of his pen scratching across papers or the faint tapping of his laptop keys. She memorized the rhythm, the pauses, the drawers opening and closing. She learned his patterns like a song she had to perform perfectly. One evening, while Chinidu was in the shower, Amelia slipped into his study. Her hands shook as she opened drawers, careful to put everything back exactly as it was. She found envelopes, business cards, and bank receipts in names she didn't recognize. One folder, tucked under a stack of tax papers, was labeled with her own name, but the contents made her stomach twist. It was a list of her father's properties, bank accounts, and assets, with notes scribbled in the margins. Notes about transfers, sales, and liquidation. Notes in Chinidu's handwriting. Her breath caught in her throat. She snapped a few quick pictures with her phone, heart pounding like a drum. Just as she slid the folder back, she heard the water shut off upstairs. She hurried out, smoothing her hair, forcing her hands not to shake. When Chinidu came down, whistling, Amelia was already curled on the couch with a book in her hands. She smiled up at him as if nothing in the world was wrong. The act was exhausting, but it was necessary. Day after day, Amelia and Dennis pieced the puzzle together. They uncovered bank accounts tied to Chinedu and Belinda. They tracked his late-night drives to a small apartment on the edge of town where Belinda lived. Amelia had once thought of Belinda as a harmless friend, someone who lingered around the edges of their social circle. Now she realized Belinda had been waiting like a spider in a web, pulling Chinedu closer with each passing week. The hardest night of all came when Amelia decided she had to see it with her own eyes. Dennis drove her quietly, his hand steady on the wheel, though his jaw was clenched tight. They parked across the street from Belinda's place. The curtains were half drawn, and through the soft glow of the lamp inside, they saw the truth. Chinedu sat on the couch with Belinda beside him, laughing, holding her hand like a man in love. Amelia's chest tightened as if someone had reached inside and squeezed her heart. She watched him lean in and kiss Belinda with the same lips that used to promise her forever. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She whispered to Dennis, "That's all I needed." Her voice was hollow, but her resolve grew iron-strong. Back home, Amelia knew the turning point had come. She couldn't keep collecting pieces forever. She had to strike before Chinedu's plans against her were complete. But how? It was Dennis who suggested it. "Make him believe he's already won," Dennis said quietly one night while they sat at the kitchen table. "Give him just enough rope to hang himself." So Amelia staged her performance. The next morning she pretended to be cheerful, almost naive. She cooked his favorite breakfast, kissed his cheek, and told him she had been thinking about her father's accounts and properties. "Maybe it's time to make some changes," she told him sweetly. "Maybe I should put more of it in your name. You've done so much for us. Daddy would have wanted you to lead." Chinedu's eyes lit up like a gambler who had just drawn the winning card. He tried to play it cool, nodding thoughtfully, but Amelia saw the greed flicker in his gaze. "That's a wise decision, sweetheart," he replied smoothly. "I'll help you handle the paperwork." Amelia nodded, hiding the storm in her heart. "Yes," she said softly. "I trust you." But in the background, Dennis was setting up the trap. He had connections in town, old friends, people who respected him and owed him favors. He arranged for calls to be traced, for hidden recorders to be ready, for the sheriff himself to be prepared once they had enough evidence. And then it happened. One night, Amelia deliberately left a file of her father's accounts on the desk, pretending she had been working through them. Chinedu thought she was asleep. He didn't know Amelia and Dennis were waiting in the dark hallway. They listened as Chinedu called Belinda, his voice dripping with triumph. "It's all falling into place," he whispered into the phone. "She's giving me control. Once it's signed over, we're set. You and me, Belinda. No more hiding. No more scraps. Just us and everything she owns." Amelia closed her eyes as the knife twisted deeper in her chest. But she held the recorder steady in her hand, every word sealing his fate. The call went on, Chinedu laughing softly, boasting about how easily Amelia had fallen for his act. "She still thinks I love her," he said with a cruel chuckle. "She has no idea what's coming." That was the breaking point. Amelia opened her eyes, no longer filled with tears but with fire. She whispered to Dennis, "We've got him." The next morning, the town woke to whispers that grew louder as the day went on. Amelia, the woman everyone admired for her grace and strength, was about to pull back the curtain on the man she had once called her husband. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here. The morning sun broke across the horizon, painting the Texas sky in streaks of orange and pink, but to Amelia, it felt like the dawn of battle. Her hands trembled as she poured herself a cup of coffee in the kitchen, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. She knew what she had to do. The truth was no longer a hidden weight inside her. It was a fire that needed to be released into the open. Dennis stood by the back door, his arms crossed, watching her quietly. He didn't speak at first. He simply let her move about the kitchen, letting her gather herself. When she finally looked up at him, he nodded once. "It's time," he said simply. Amelia returned the nod. She had already made her decision. Today would not end like every other day, with Chinedu smiling in his expensive suit and hiding his betrayals behind charming words. Today the mask would come off, and the world would see him for who he truly was. The town was small and word traveled fast. That was why Amelia had chosen to make her move during the community's Saturday gathering at the town hall. It was a place where neighbors came together to share food, music, and news. It was a place where reputations were built, or destroyed. Amelia knew if she confronted Chinedu in front of everyone, there would be no denying the truth. But first, she had to make sure the law was on her side. Dennis had already spoken to the sheriff, showing him the recordings and the documents Amelia had gathered. The sheriff, a tall man with a quiet but steady presence, didn't say much at first. He simply listened to the recordings, flipping through the evidence with narrowed eyes. When the final recording of Chinedu's late-night phone call with Belinda played, the sheriff leaned back in his chair and let out a slow whistle. "You've been living with a snake," the sheriff said finally, looking at Amelia with both sympathy and respect. "Don't worry, ma'am. We'll be ready." Those words gave Amelia strength. For so long she had felt like she was drowning, caught between love and betrayal, trust and suspicion. Now she wasn't alone. She had Dennis. She had the sheriff. And soon, she would have the truth laid bare in front of everyone. When Saturday came, Amelia dressed carefully. She chose a simple but elegant blue dress her father had once complimented, saying it made her look strong. She tied her hair back and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same woman who had once blindly trusted Chinedu with her heart and her future. This woman had walked through fire and come out forged in steel. The town hall buzzed with chatter and laughter as families carried in casseroles and children ran around with balloons. Music played faintly from the corner where a local band tuned their instruments. Chinedu stood at the center of it all, smiling broadly, shaking hands, laughing as if he owned the room. To the crowd, he still looked like the perfect husband and successful man. Amelia's stomach turned at the sight, but she stood tall as she walked through the doors. Dennis stayed close, his steady presence a quiet reassurance. The sheriff was also there, blending into the crowd but watching carefully. Everything was in place. All Amelia had to do was find the right moment. Came sooner than she expected. Chinedu spotted her across the room and hurried over, his smile wide. He leaned down to kiss her cheek in front of everyone, playing the role of doting husband. Amelia accepted it without flinching, her face calm. "Darling," he said loudly, "I was just telling everyone how proud I am of you." His voice was smooth, dripping with false affection. That was the moment. Amelia stepped back slightly, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. Conversations quieted as people sensed something was happening. The music faded. All eyes turned toward her. "Proud of me," Amelia said softly, her voice trembling just enough to draw everyone in. Then she straightened, her tone sharpening. "Or proud of how well you've been lying to me. Proud of how you've been stealing from me. Proud of the way you've been planning to destroy everything my father left behind." The room went silent. Gasps echoed. Chinedu's smile faltered for the first time. "What are you talking about?" he said quickly, trying to laugh it off. "Sweetheart, you're embarrassing yourself." Amelia's hands didn't shake as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small recorder. She pressed play. Chinedu's own voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "It's all falling into place. She's giving me control. Once it's signed over, we're set. You and me, Belinda. No more hiding. No more scraps. Just us and everything she owns." The crowd gasped again, louder this time. Faces turned toward Chinedu with shock, anger, and disbelief. Chinedu's face drained of color. He reached for Amelia's arm, but she stepped back firmly, her eyes blazing. "That's your voice," Amelia said coldly. "Your words. You wanted to take everything my father worked for, everything I trusted you with. And you wanted me gone so you could live happily with Belinda." The sheriff stepped forward then, his hand resting on his belt. "That's enough, Chinedu. You're under arrest. Chinidu's eyes darted around wildly, searching for escape, but there was none. The sheriff's deputies moved in, and the crowd parted like water, whispers rippling through the hall. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others glared at Chinidu with disgust. His carefully built image shattered in seconds. As they cuffed him, Chinidu turned back to Amelia, his face twisting with fury. "You'll regret this," he spat. But Amelia didn't flinch. She held his gaze until he was dragged out the door. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint sound of the band's instruments buzzing in the corner. Then someone started clapping. Slowly, others joined in, until the whole room echoed with applause, not for the downfall of Chinidu, but for the strength of Amelia. Amelia didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of years of betrayal finally lifting from her shoulders. Later that night, when the town hall had emptied and the quiet of the ranch surrounded her, Amelia sat on the porch with Dennis. The stars stretched endlessly above them, the Texas night sky vast and comforting. "You did it," Dennis said softly, handing her a glass of sweet tea. Amelia took a sip, her hands still trembling slightly. "We did it," she corrected him. "I couldn't have faced this alone." Dennis nodded, but he didn't push further. He just sat beside her, his presence steady and warm. After a long silence, Amelia finally let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for years. "I loved him once," she admitted quietly, more to herself than to Dennis. "And I don't know if I'll ever understand how he could betray me like that. But I won't let him destroy me. I won't let him destroy Daddy's legacy." Her words floated into the night, carried away by the soft breeze rustling through the fields. For the first time in a long time, Amelia felt free. Not healed yet. Healing would take time, but free to begin again. In the weeks that followed, Chinidu's trial became the talk of the county. The evidence Amelia and Dennis had gathered was overwhelming. Fraud, theft, conspiracy. It was all laid out, and there was no way for him to charm his way out of it. Belinda fled town, her apartment abandoned, her name cursed in whispers. Amelia meanwhile began rebuilding. She took over her father's accounts fully, making sure every property and investment was secure. She walked into his old office, sat in his chair, and for the first time felt she was truly carrying on his work, not just protecting it. The townspeople rallied around her. Women came by with casseroles and words of encouragement. Men tipped their hats when they passed her on the street, saying, "We're proud of you, Amelia." She wasn't used to being the center of attention, but she accepted it with quiet grace. Through it all, Dennis remained by her side. Not pushing, not demanding, just there. Loyal as ever, the way her father had once trusted him to be. One evening, as they stood by the pasture watching the horses graze, Amelia turned to him and said softly, "You've always been here, even when I didn't want to see it." Dennis looked at her, his eyes steady. "I'll always be here," he replied simply. Amelia didn't answer right away. She just let the moment settle, a small smile touching her lips. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future not built on lies, but on loyalty. Not built on betrayal, but on trust. The scars of the past would remain, but so would her strength. She had walked through the fire, and though it had burned her, it had not destroyed her. Instead, it had shaped her into someone her father would have been proud of. And as the Texas sun dipped below the horizon that night, Amelia knew the story wasn't ending. It was only beginning.